So what I'm going to take you through is the lessons we learned while we were planning the redesign, throughout the redesign, and then after we were done, which you're never really done. So starting with planning. So the first thing that we wanted to do is, lesson number 1 was reviewing all of the different data sources that we had for information about our website, so we knew what we wanted to redesign. So we looked at what visitors were doing on the site. We looked at what our customers were saying in the surveys back to us. And the employees, as always, have a lot of feedback on what's happening on the site. And we consulted with a couple of different agencies to learn what they thought about our website. And the last thing we did was the competitive benchmarking study with Keynote. And they looked at our site in comparison to 9 or 10 other sites that were both in the PC industry and outside. And what they said was, your site is horrible. You have a lot of things to fix. There was like 95 pages from Keynote of all of the different things that they wanted us to fix. So lesson number 2 is focusing in on 3 to 4 key issues, because obviously you can't address everything. So what we looked at was people that were coming to our site. We had a good experience for the people that were familiar with Lenovo and familiar with our ThinkPad products. So they could find the products easily. But there was this other audience of non-tech savvy users, like people like my mom, that they don't know, what they want in a PC. And they really had difficulty finding the product that would meet their needs. The other thing is we had set up our site based on how we were structured at Lenovo, and not really the best experience from a customer perspective. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but we had created this products flow and this shop flow, and it was really confusing to the customers. And then the third thing we wanted to focus on was our purchase process. So it was a really long process you had to go through to actually configure or customize a machine with all the different specs that you wanted and add on accessories and services. So we really wanted to make that process a little bit easier going forward. So lesson number 2, focusing in on those key issues. And then we also created these redesign guiding principles. We wanted some things that were going to really kind of structure us as we were going through the process. So the first thing was this balance goal. And so I don't know how many of you are on the marketing side or the e-com side. I get paid based on how much we sell, so I care more about the sales side. But the marketing team, Lenovo.com is a manufacturer website. They want to provide a branded experience. So it was balancing these goals of providing that branded experience, but also making sales on the site, right, which is what we were there for. And then simplifying the experience. Like I said, that our process was really cumbersome and very long, so we really wanted to help people get to the right product that would meet their needs more quickly and easily. And then we wanted to have that wow factor of delivering one of the best PC experiences in the industry. So redesigns will always take longer than you expect. We started our project in January of 2012, and our original goal was to launch in October. We launched our first test in January, and I'll show you some of the results from the first test, but that meant we had to do another test, and we launched that in March, and we actually went live a couple months ago in June. So it's going to take longer than you expect, so you want to anticipate those changes and those delays into you can't anticipate everything, but at least plan some buffer into your schedule, especially because when you're doing the testing, for us specifically, because it was such a dramatic change, we actually had to maintain 2 different websites. So you have to maintain all of the content in both places. And we have a lot of products that come in and out of the site on a regular basis, so we had to make sure that we were putting that information on both of those sites. So throughout the redesign, so communication is critical. So you want to make sure you're not working in silos, that your project team is really cross-functional. So one of the big things was making sure that we had people that were representative from marketing as well as from the e-com side on our project team. Because if it was all marketing or all e-com, then that balance principle really goes out the window, right? And you want to engage people early in the process, because if you bring them in after you've already decided on a bunch of stuff, they're not going to feel like they really had a voice in that process, and they're not going to feel invested in what you come up with. Over-communicating is better than sporadic communication. So people start to get disengaged if they're not getting a regular communication from you, and they just feel like, oh, they don't care what I think or whatever. So really making sure that you're over-communicating versus not communicating at all, or having maybe onesie-twosie kind of emails going out. And creating a regular meeting cadence. So some weeks we'd have 1 meeting, maybe some weeks we'd have 3, or some weeks we'd have no meetings. You really need to have a meeting at least once a week to make sure that you're making progress on the goals that you're going through. And then the sharing of information and results. So I'll talk about what our results were for phase 1, but some of that information didn't actually get shared with some of our other geographies. And so you want to make sure that they know that so they can avoid the mistakes that you were making when you started it. And then, again, developing that process for making changes when you actually go live. Testing with, this one sounds like a no-brainer, I know, but testing with customers that will actually shop on your website. So early in the process, we did an in-person prototype testing with some candidates, and we had the agency recruit those candidates, and they ended up being people that were much more comfortable going to a retail store and not people that would actually shop on Lenovo.com. So most of the results we had to throw away because it really wasn't relevant to what we were doing from a redesign perspective on the site. Leveraging internal experts as well as agencies. So agencies can bring something to the table because they can think outside of the box. They also have the experience with other vendors or companies to bring, some of their expertise from that perspective. But the employees are the ones that are really familiar with your products, and they know their technological limitations. So you can save time by leveraging both of your employees and agencies throughout the redesign process. Think like your customers. So this is what I was referring to earlier when I said we had this kind of messed up navigation flow. We had created this products flow and the shop flow. So the products was the marketing, and then the shop was the e-commerce side. In the products, the original intention was that that would be where customers will go and research about the product or learn about the product. And the shop section would be where you would actually go and make the purchase. But in actuality, a lot of the content ended up being very similar, and so customers were confused. Do I go to products? Do I go to shop? Do I go to both? Am I missing something? So we really wanted to make sure that we addressed that as part of the redesign and think like our customers were thinking and organize our site based on that, not based on how we were structured. So we simplified the navigation. We combined the elements that were in that shop and products flow into one streamlined navigation, and we elevated the products to be the primary navigation. So you can see here laptops, desktops, tablets is the primary navigation along the top. And then we created this mega menu approach where we still organized our products by brand and series, but we added descriptive information under each of those so that people that weren't familiar with our alphabet soup of all the different series, A, B, C series that we have, would understand a little bit more about the product. And then the third thing we did was to add tools to this mega menu. So we have a link directly to get to our promotion pages, to get to that top seller and best rated pages, as well as our PC Finder tool, which I'll talk a little bit about. So one size does not fit all. So we know that we have different types of customers, and we really, like I said earlier, that tech-savvy customer, the non-tech-savvy customer. So we really wanted to make sure that we had different tools that different types of customers could use. So one of those examples is our PC Finder tool. So in the original design, the PC Finder tool was pretty labor-intensive. It took about 5 minutes to go through, and there were a bunch of different steps that you had to go through. And in the redesign, what we wanted to do is really simplify that, so going with that whole simplify theme. So we put all of the questions on one page together, and this is really for people that don't know exactly what they're looking for. So you're asking them questions like, how are you going to use your PC, or what type of features are important to you, versus what is the product specs that you want, right? And then, so what we did was put all the questions on one page together along with the results, and then we elevated that on the site by adding it to our masthead, as well as putting it directly on the homepage for people to get to it. And we found 81% more engagement with the redesigned PC Finder than on the default site. Another tool is the faceted browse. So faceted browse is really the more techie tool. It's where you know the product specifications. So you know that you want a particular processor or screen size, and you're looking for products that match those needs. And so on the old site, we had this faceted browse that was laid out on the page horizontally, and we had it collapsed by default. So customer actually had to click on that yellow button to engage with it and open it. On the new design, we wanted to make sure that it was in a consistent location across all of the pages and expanded by default so the customer didn't have to actually go through. And we found a 20% lift in engagement with the faceted browse as part of the redesign effort. Relying on data, not opinions. So when you come and you're doing a redesign, there's always going to be a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and everybody's going to have an opinion about what they want to do. So you really need to rely on that data to inform what you're doing and not the opinions. So we launched our first test. We launched it to 20% of the traffic, 10% getting the default site, 10% getting the new design site. And what we found was mixed results. There was a good thing where visitors were making it further into the site, so it accomplished that goal that we had earlier of really streamlining that navigation. We had actually 26% more visitors making it into our series page, and then 13% making it more onto our product page, and then a 6% more lift in the people making it to our shopping cart. However, they weren't buying. So the 7% drop in conversion rate and the 10% drop in revenue per visitor, those were both with 96% confidence. So if we had gone out with this design the way that everybody, or some people and some people didn't think it was going to work, thought that it was going to be and really relied on those opinions, we would have lost millions of dollars. So it really goes to show that you need to rely on that data and do testing to make sure that something works before, and not rely on all of those voices that are swimming in the meetings. Don't get married to your design. So people start to feel really possessive. They're like, no, but I really love that element, or I really wanted this on the page. And especially when something like this takes, the 18 months that it took us to work on it. But you really need to be able to throw away what's working and base your decisions on the data and do what's necessary to get the best business results. And sometimes the fastest flow is not always the best flow, which I'll show you here in a minute. So one of the big elements of our redesign was our products page. So we had two different products pages in the old experience. We had the products page on that products flow I was talking about, and the products page on the shop flow. So we combined the elements that were in both of those and put that onto one streamlined page that had all of the information that a customer would need to make a purchase. So things like adding a big product image, adding an integrated gallery to this page with alternate views and videos of that particular product, as well as adding tabs to reduce the need to scroll down the page. And then we added this configurator experience onto the page directly. So what we found, we decided we needed to dig into that data based on those phase 1 results that I showed you guys earlier. Obviously not a positive thing. So we dug into the data and we determined that our Think product pages, and Think is our profit driver, it's our business machine, it's really where we get our bread and butter. So we dug into the results of that Think product page a little bit more and figured out that the RPV overall was, the RPV for Think was impacting the negative impact on RPV overall, because again, that's where we make our profit. So we, on the phase 1, what we did was remove this good, better, best choice that you can see on the screen here of having different levels of configurations on the page. And we made 2 missteps with that. Number 1, we know that customers are comforted by that choice as part of their decision-making process. And then number 2 is we removed our ability to make additional profit with some of those higher-end systems. So in phase 2, we actually added those good, better, best models back to the page, and we saw 14% lift in RPV and conversion, both with high confidence. And again, this is compared to the default site, not compared to phase 1. So if you compare it to phase 1, it would be an even bigger impact. So again, not getting married to that design, being able to throw away something that's not working and test something else out and move forward based on that. Bringing fresh eyes to redesign projects. So like I said already, this can take a really long time. Ours took 18 months. By, I think, 8 months in, I didn't even want to see those people anymore. I was like, get out of my face. I don't even want to talk to you. And so it's important to bring in that fresh eyes and that fresh perspective. And so I actually had my merchandising manager come in at about the 10-month mark and take over and really kind of bring that fresh energy to the project, because you will get burned out, especially when you're meeting with the same people day in and day out on the same topic and arguing over and over again, right? So after the redesign. So don't create page templates too early. So the worldwide team really wanted to create these page templates to make sure that there was consistency across the different geographies. So again, going back to that branding element of the marketing team's goal. But I think we created those way too early in the process. We did that as part of phase 1, and then we made so many changes as part of phase 2 that we then had to go back and readjust all those templates, and so it created a lot more work. So you just want to make sure, if you do want to create that consistency, that you do it at a point in time that makes sense, because you will need to be like nimble and responsive to what the sales needs are of the business. looking at the results comprehensively. So there's a lot of data always, but we primarily focused on the conversion and the RPV. One of the things that we didn't focus so much on was attach rate, and we're finding right now that our new design is significantly impacting our attach rate, and so it's one of the things that we're addressing with our subsequent tests. But you also want to look at things like average order value. What are your customers saying about the site? Are they engaging with the different pages that you had or the different tools? How is it impacting customers by type? So those new versus return visitors, or maybe it's people coming from different DG tactics like email or search. How are they impacting? And looking at digging into the results and seeing if the experience is the same for all of them. And then how are they using the tools that you've created, and what are they doing from a page perspective? And then obviously cart abandonment is a big focus. So we really should have focused a little bit more on attach rate as part of our process, and that was a lesson that we learned. And then finally, and I know this was mentioned in the blinds.com presentation earlier, is you're never done with testing. You're always going to be making improvements, making tweaks, and you're never really done. So we, as an e-com team, we are making notes of all the things that we wanted to do during the redesign that either one, time didn't permit, or two, politicalness didn't permit, right? So it was too big of an argument to tackle within the time frame. So we made a list of all of those, and then we prioritized the top 20. So we had that list ready to go as soon as we were done with our redesign. And one of those is actually testing out a different laptops experience. So right now on our site, the laptops page is organized by brand, so ThinkPad, IdeaPad, and Essential. And we really wanted to see whether testing it out by usage, so people that would come in like for gaming or entertainment, or testing it out by type, so somebody that really wants a high performance machine versus someone that's just going to use it for everyday things like email and surfing on the internet. And what we found with this test, it's actually one of the good results that we had, 99.9% confidence that there was over 30% improvement in both RPV and conversion for the one usage. So it was a really good story. And we've got lots more tests to run, obviously, as part of this. So just to recap, make sure you're informing your design with reviewing data from multiple sources, that if you have a lot of information back, that you're focusing on those top 3 to 4 issues, that you create some principles to guide you through the process, and that it's always going to take longer than you expect, so try to plan that into your timeline, that having that clear communication is really critical to the project. Making sure you're testing with customers that will actually shop on your site, leveraging those internal employees as well as the agencies, thinking like your customers, that one size doesn't fit all. You might need to develop different tools for different customer types, that you need to rely on data and not all of the opinions that you're going to hear. Bringing fresh eyes into that, don't get married to your redesign, and bringing fresh eyes into your projects. Don't create those page templates too early in the process, and look at your results comprehensively, and never stop testing. I mean, that's just kind of ingrained in us by now, I think. So thank you. If you guys have, you want anything from me, there's my email, and I will open it up for any questions. Yeah, I think she's coming.
I'm very interested in all the testing you were able to do during the development process. And so were you guys testing wireframes? Were you testing like a development site? What were you using for the test?
So in the prototype one where we had the wrong people, that was a prototype, so it wasn't a working site. But when we actually went live in January with our first phase, it was a whole other site created. So we were testing because of our navigation flow, you really couldn't, test. It had to be an end-to-end experience, right? So we had created that whole separate site. So that's what I was saying earlier. When you're planning it out, that was a lot longer of a testing cycle than we had planned, and we were really significantly hampered from a resource perspective because we had to maintain that content in both of those places. So yeah, we had created a whole separate site to test on.
And you were able to get management approval for the budget required for that? That's what interested me so much, because for us, we went through this long, gory 2-year redesign process, and the time was never the problem, the deadline. That was fluid. It was always the budget dollars that were
Yeah, I mean,
Were you being squeezed on?
most of the budget was spent on those consultations up front and not so much on the actual development. We did most of that in-house. And again, this was a worldwide project, but we really were focused on the US site as part of the testing period. So we didn't have that same challenge. And they did have to create like a separate environment for us to test on. They just called it like a beta, lenovo.com/beta. So there was a little bit of budget that was required to create that experience. But this initiative was like such a big initiative for the company overall that it had that executive level support, and so I know we didn't have that same challenge. Anybody else?
Put my cardio in.
Thank you. I would just be curious to know, I know it took a lot longer for the redesign to come through than it did, than originally planned. In terms of, a follow-up question on budget, in terms of how much you wound up spending versus what your initial plan was to spend, I'd just be curious if you had any, anything you could share about how much more that actually wound up costing you. We're looking at a redesign as well, and just trying to think about how much additional fudge factor to consider.
Yeah, it wasn't so much on the budgeting, because like I said, the budget was really more on that agency and the upfront design cost that we spent it on. And so it was really more a resource constraint than a budget. So it didn't, I don't think it impacted the budget dramatically. I mean, maybe the design got stretched out a little bit, so we had to pay the agency an extra month or so. But as far as the overall, it was really more all of the people that were working at Lenovo that were getting frustrated, like, let's do something, let's get it done faster. So not as much of a money as a resource. Anybody else? Okay, now everyone can go drink. Thank you, guys.